Hey, hi, I'm gonna talk about the use of dry mode in an aircon and its possible problems that you might be facing. The reason is that I understand that some of you might be running on the dry mode on the promise that it reduces the energy bill, but it may cost you a lot in some other areas. So, okay, the technology behind the dry mode is very simple. A cold surface remove more moisture. So if you run your aircon on a normal, I would say cooling mode, the surface temperature of the fan coil, it can go as low as probably 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. And when you first turn it on, of course, the surface temperature may not be as cold. The surface temperature may start off with like maybe 12, 18 degrees because the room is hot and it picks up the heat and the surface doesn't cool down as much, which is natural. So meaning to say the surface temperature of the fan coil actually begins quite warm until going down to about 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. So meaning to say when you first turn on your aircon, within the first 5 minutes, it's not going to produce a lot of condensation, which is normal. This explains why when your water pipe is clogged, when you first turn on the aircon, you will not drip immediately, but maybe after 5 to 10 minutes later. That is because the room has already cooled down and the surface temperature of the fan coil has dropped further to maybe 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. It also has got to do with your nowadays we are running inverter aircon, so the inverter technology may actually slowly pick up the cooling capacity depending on what brand, what energy label. So the first generation of the inverter aircon, for example, the 3-thick Daikin, it behaves very differently. For those aircon is that when you first turn it on and when the room is hot, the compressor actually gives you 50% more extra load. So meaning to say if your fan coil is a 8000 BTU and when the room is hot, it supplies you up to 12,000 BTU cooling capacity. So immediately your coil is very cold already because the system can handle such extra heat. So for those aircon, you may experience a much faster water dripping issue if your water pipe is clogged. But as the technology inch towards a 4-thick, 5-thick, certain brands, certain manufacturer, in order to compete in the energy labor space, what they did is that they may decide to start off the aircon not too cold. So I've seen some cases whereby it start off just like 4000 BTU slowly and then slowly climbing up. So those aircon is terrible. It just feels like very warm, it's very slow cooling. So end up people have to actually start the system by lowering it to 18 degrees Celsius or so, because that actually pushes the aircon to supply you more while you first start up. It's the technology's problem. So in real life there shouldn't be a need to do so, but it really depends on the mode that you're having. So what happens when you run a dry mode? A dry mode, the concept is simple. What that it attempts to do is to create a fan coil that is very cold. So how do you do it? Is that if you switch to a dry mode, the compressor might be turning at a higher capacity, so it supplies more refrigerant to the fan coil, and at the same time the fan speed is going to be very slow, because if the fan speed is high, then the coil will not be as cold. So what they is trying to do is that immediately they wants to create a fan coil that is like 3 to 5 degrees or even inching towards 0 degrees Celsius. The colder surface it is, the more moisture is going to remove. So it starts off like this, but you're not experiencing the cold air because everything is trapped inside the coil. So and then it may occasionally stop the fan totally. So if you don't run the fan, actually the coil can even freeze into a block of ice. But they have temperature sensor at the fan coil. They are not going to allow that to happen, but it's going to try to push it towards the 0 degrees Celsius. So then after it's almost close to 0 degrees Celsius, it will activate the fan, sometimes very quickly, sometimes slowly, to push out the cold air, or rather to exchange the package of cold air, because the area around the aircon should be dry already. But what about the corner of the room? So it's going to blast it out and then starts pulling out hot moist air from other parts of the room into the system. So this is how the dry mode works. But what I want to bring to your attention is that in Singapore's climate, running a dry mode can be counterproductive. Why do I say so? Is that because our humidity level is very high. It's almost 75% and above daily. So unless your room is always shut, your windows are properly shut, you don't move in and out of your room. So if you run your aircon on the dry mode, it brings the humidity level of the room down to maybe as low as 40% relative humidity. But it can't go anything lower than that, because there is always air gaps. So you're lucky if you can get it at 30% relative humidity in a really airtight room. So, but you must remember is that the fan coil now internally is very cold. So we are looking at maybe 0 to 3 degrees Celsius. And the internal parts of the aircon is now super cold. So, but as more and more moisture gets removed from the air, you'll find that after maybe half an hour or so, when the air is dry, right, the amount of condensate water that's removed from the system actually getting less and less. So as the aircon is running over maybe an hour or so, you'll find that actually inside of the aircon, the fan coil may not be as wet anymore. It's just that beginning is very wet. And that is the time the aircon actually runs quite efficiently. But we also have to take into consideration how airtight your room is. As long as your room is not airtight, there will be moisture replenishment. So be it a dry mode or this cool mode, chances are inside of the fan coil, I mean in terms of the dryness in the fan coil, after a prolonged period of time, it might be similar. So, but the problem here is that in a residential property, people move in and out. So if you are in a property where you keep moving in and out of your room, or you have kids at home that keeps opening the door, then running a dry mode can be counterproductive. Because the moment you open, the hot moist air comes in, it replenishes the moisture in the room very, very quickly. So then you find that because the inside of the fan coil is actually much colder as compared to a normal aircon, the internal parts of the aircon is going to condense even more. But but does it really pose a problem? Maybe not, because you see, if it forms at the fan coil, the water actually gets collected on the water drain, pipes it out, so no problem. So that might not be an issue. But what is the issue then? The issue is that the fan coil, which we are trying to push to about 0 to 3 degrees Celsius, actually shares the same coil with the copper pipe that connects between the fan coil to the condenser. So that copper pipe is actually also subjected to a much lower temperature as compared to the running on a normal cooling mode. So, and this copper pipe being cold is insulated using this rubber sleeve. So to give you an idea, an industrial building's aircon, you have a copper pipe and you have an insulation sleeve. The insulation sleeve is like a 6-inch pipe, you know. outer case is metal, copper pipe in the center, and then you got this foam actually protecting and preventing moisture entering, and also preventing heat picking up. So industrial insulation for real industrial units, for example those church systems, you have a really massively insulated water pipe system, or rather this refrigerant pipe system. But our home, we are using this sponge-like material, you know, right? And sometimes the installer will tell you that we are using Armaflex class 1. But this class 1, what it means is that it's fire retardant, in case if your building catch fire, this thing don't burn very quickly. It doesn't matter whether it's class 1, class 2, as long as your house don't catch fire. So this insulation material needs to be very thick. But how thick are we using? For standard installation is roughly like that. Okay, standard ones. Because we don't have that space, you can't pack really thick insulation material. So for those installation materials that where we see in our HDB flat, usually it's quite thin. Condo, they might have a luxury to put in a large, thicker insulation because the pipes are running above the false ceiling. It has got more space, but really depends from developer to developer. And for HDB kind of insulation that we are normally using, you find that if you run your aircon at very low temperature setting or dry mode, you're gonna stress the insulation. It can't handle that kind of load. So you end up, let's say HDB, right? You have this casing, rectangular block casing where you put your copper pipe inside. Then you start to see all those marks on the casing, black color mold growing on it, because the copper pipe inside is too cold already, couldn't handle it, and it starts to condense. So that's the side effect of using a dry mode. And you gotta weigh how much benefit are you really deriving from a possible dry mode savings versus the damage to your insulation material and to your paintwork in your house. So in my opinion, don't run the dry mode. It is actually going to cause you a problem at your insulation casing. Yeah, thanks.